If you saw my video about the iconic Sony PSF9, the Flamingo, the vertical battery-powered linear turntable, you might remember in that video I mentioned some of the alternative models that were out at the time, such as the Technica Sound Burger. Now in the video I showed this picture, and in the corner of that was a sound crocodile, and quite a few people asked me, could I do a review of the sound crocodile? Well, I can't. It was just a humorous drawing that was put on the advertisement in Japan. However, I can now review the Soundburger because after a bit of a search I've finally managed to track one down at a price I was prepared to pay. The Soundburger was introduced to the UK in 1983, and just like the Sony turntable, it could be run from batteries and listened to through its supplied folding headphones, and also plugged into your home hi-fi and powered from a wall power supply. However, unlike the Sony model, which could be played vertically and had a linear tracking fully automatic mechanism, this was a simpler deck. You could only play it horizontally, and it had a manual mechanism. It was basically a normal turntable that had just been cut down in size. It did, however, come from Audio-Technica, a well-established and respected manufacturer of turntable pickup cartridges, and presumably they thought it was worth trying to branch out into the portable audio market after seeing the massive success of the Sony Walkman. When the Soundburger was launched in the US, it was rebranded Mr. Disc, presumably to prevent people from suing them after trying to eat it. But you can see the advertisement here. There's a chap sat on these steps, he's outside, he's got his record player with him and he's listening to his records through his headphones. It might remind you of this picture that was doing the rounds a few years ago where people were saying this guy was the ultimate hipster. Well, he's just a pretender to the throne. This guy is the original guy, he's the OG. He's sat outside with his record player in 1983, and if you look underneath his bag there, he's got a stack of records ready to go, so he's got his playlist ready for the next few hours. And in addition to being branded Soundburger and Mr. Disc, there's another one of these, which is the Dual PRP5. That one seems to be the rarest of the bunch, though. But no matter which one you try and get, if you go on eBay, you'll find that these things are very expensive, especially when they're new in box like these ones here in pristine. I managed to get hold of one quite a bit cheaper than any of those on eBay by buying it from Japan. So this is the one that I got. I wouldn't have really chosen yellow, but it was the best one that was available, and it was from the Japanese Yahoo auctions, although I got it via the Jaws intermediate site, and it ended up costing the equivalent of about £106 or so. But on top of that, you pay for postage and import duties and admin fees and things, so it's probably just under £200 all in by the time it arrived at my door at the UK. Now, one problem with buying from Japanese auction websites is the descriptions are very vague, and everyone just says, oh, just throw it into the Google Translate thing. Well, you can do that, but if the information isn't there to start with, it doesn't give you an awful lot more. For example, this one just says, cartridges such that the needle is there, but no disc, will become a confirmation of the power supply and the rotation only, which to me sounds like the guy saying he doesn't have a record to test it, but it does power on and it spins. But, you know, I'm reading between the lines here, and £200 is still £200. But anyway, I took the gamble and it arrived, and here it is. Now, despite the fact it sounded dodgy, the guy saying he didn't have a disc to test a record player with, surely he could get one off someone, I did try it out and he was accurate with his description. It does turn on and it does spin. The only issue is that it will need new belts. I can tell that the disc wasn't moving smoothly when you put a record on. It keeps changing its pitch, it's got a lot of wow and flutter, and also with my strobe disc I can see the speed is going much too slow on here. So time to take it apart and put a new belt in it. It's a really easy machine to take apart, this one. There's just 2 screws that have to be loosened in the rear 2 feet, and then 3 taken out in the middle. I'm also removing the batteries just to reduce the weight down a little bit, and then the 2 halves come apart like that. Although, just be careful you don't snag or snap those wires. To make sure I'm not stretching them too much, I'm going to put the base on the top here. Now, I've got my replacement belts. I bought these from eBay. They didn't cost much at all, and you get a pack of 2 because the machine uses 2 different sizes. You can see inside the machine here, the one that's the looser of the 2 is the one that's going around the motor to the wheel in the middle, and it's hardly gripping on there at all, which is why the whole thing's slipping and running too slowly. So I'll just take that one off, and then we'll take the large one off, which didn't seem as bad, but I'm going to replace them both, of course, while I'm in here. So putting the larger belt on the large wheel first, you have to stretch it around there, and it goes into an indentation, a notch that's around the base of that wheel, which holds it in position. Then once you've got it in there, you can stretch it over the wheel in the middle, like that, and then once that one's there, just spin it around a few times, just make sure everything's in position and it's not all twisted, although it is a square belt, so it will straighten itself out. Now we've got the smaller belt, we're putting that around the wheel in the middle here first, and then stretch that across onto the motor. Now because the motor's switched off at the moment, it won't rotate very easily, but I just want to turn that a few times just to make sure everything's located properly. Now while I've got the base of this, it's a great opportunity for me to clean these two pots here. One of these adjusts the speed for the 45 mode and one for the 33 1/3. So I'll need to spray those with a bit of contact cleaner, and also I might as well spray the volume control while I'm here as well, just to make sure there's no crackles on there. So I just spray those with the contact cleaner, and then I work them back and forth with the screwdriver just to make sure I've cleaned off any oxidization, and of course do the same with the volume control, but I can do that with my thumb, not with a screwdriver. But as you can see, it's a very easy job to replace the belts in this particular turntable, so if you do see one of these for sale at any point and someone says it's running a bit slowly, or perhaps it turns on, they can hear the motor but nothing's turning, then very easy just to get a set of belts and replace them yourself. Now to the left of the battery compartment there are two holes there. Those are the ones that I'll be putting a screwdriver through to properly adjust the speed in a bit, and also the battery compartment lid. The sponge that should have been on there has disintegrated, so I'll clean that off with some isopropyl alcohol, and then I'm going to put some adhesive sponge on there, the same one that I've used in the past to repair 8-track cartridges. It just stops the batteries from rattling around. According to the manual, 3 C-cell batteries will power this turntable for 2 hours, although it doesn't mention whether those are alkaline batteries in that test, so it's possible you could get quite a bit longer than that. However, my first job is to adjust the playback speed. Now I'm going to hold the tone arm in position here to stop it moving onto the record, but it does have to be off its rest position for it to turn. I'm putting my strobe disc on here, and in case you don't know how one of these works, the idea is that the markings on there should look like they're standing still when the disc is turning. So the outside markings are the ones we're looking at here, the very outside ones, those should look like they're static. And to get them to look like that, I'll put a screwdriver through the base here while holding it over the edge of a table, and I'll twist those pots back and forth to try and get the markings to look like they're standing still. However, whilst I could accurately adjust the 45 RPM speed, that's the one in from the edge, that one there, it looks like those markings are pretty static. They are moving a little bit fast, but it isn't too big a deal. If I switch the 33 1/3 RPM mode on, that's the outside ring, you can see that one is moving a little bit quicker than it should do. Now if we compare that to my main Denon turntable, which is a quartz lock turntable, you can see that's what it's supposed to look like. Those marks are supposed to look like they're not moving at all on the outside ring at 33 1/3. Unfortunately though, the pot that I'm adjusting for that speed on the Soundburger only goes from way too fast down to just a little bit too fast. That's as far as you can turn it. I don't think I'll be able to identify it was being played just this fraction too fast though from listening to a record, so it's not a big problem. And finally, since I've got no idea how worn out that stylus is, I might as well replace it. Now this turntable uses a proper moving magnet cartridge with a replaceable stylus. Unfortunately though, Audio-Technica no longer make that stylus, but you can get it from third-party manufacturers. So I've got a brand new one here, which I just installed by clipping on there, and we're pretty much ready to go. So let me just show you around the machine itself. So we've got an on-off button at the top here, and below there we've got the speed control between 33 and 45. Taking a look around the back, we've got the carry handle, then below that on the bottom left there are 2 headphone outputs that you can listen with a friend, DC power input at the bottom right there, RCA line out, so there's a bit of a crack above there. I think someone's forced the plugs into there, but it hasn't affected the operation of the unit. And then top left we've got the screw hole for the transportation screw, which would lock the tone arm in place. I don't have that, but it doesn't really affect anything. And moving down the side here, here's the switch which operates the catch mechanism, which enables the two halves to be separated and those close together with a nice reassuring click. And then on the front here we've got the volume control for those headphone outputs. There's just one more thing to show, and it's this at the front here. Now see if you can figure out what this is for. Obviously if you've got one of these you'll know, but to somebody like me getting it for the first time, I couldn't figure out what that did. It's not an aerial, it looks like one. It turns out, according to the manual, that it's for putting your headphone cable through. The idea is you keep it away from the spinning record, it stops everything getting tangled up. But it does seem a little bit superfluous, because your cable's going nearer to the record when you put it through that. I'd just make sure that the cable came out to the other end and stayed away from the spinning disc. So to play a record, you open it up and you take the tone arm out of the rest and move it over to the right hand side where it locks in position, and that rest has two additional functions. It operates as a 45 RPM adapter for the records with the large centre hole, and in addition for the records with a smaller hole you put it on top after you've put the record on, and it acts as a stabiliser. It's made of rubber and it grips to that centre spindle and just provides a little bit of extra downward force just to stop the record wobbling about. And in some clips in this video you'll notice I'm not using the stabiliser, and it's only for the reason that I downloaded the instructions after I'd shot those sections. I hadn't realised at the time it was a stabiliser, but it doesn't affect the sound quality, so it's nothing to be concerned about. Now when you move the arm into its fully extended position, it operates this little micro switch, which as you can see stops the turntable from spinning. It's a very smart and convenient little record player, and it packs away neatly enough so you can carry it around in a bag, and I believe quite a few people do take these with them to record fairs and the like so they can listen to the records that are being sold there, audition them if you will through their headphones, just to check there are no issues with them before they decide to buy. There's no need to be concerned about the Soundburger damaging your records because the tracking force is a very respectable 1.86 grams. Now I do remember seeing a Soundburger for sale in the window of my local electrical retailers in the early 80s. It was a Rumbelows, and for years later I thought I must have imagined it because I never saw them for sale anywhere else ever again. I don't know how long they were on the market for, but there was a reason I wouldn't be able to afford one back then, and it's because they cost $89.95 in the UK, which doesn't sound too much nowadays, but if we compare that to what else you could have got for a similar price, looking in the Argos catalogue for 1983, the year that this thing came out, I could have got this Ferguson record player, radio and cassette with the stereo speakers for just £10 more. Now I know that's not a brilliant system, but somebody looking at the two things in a shop at the time would think, well, that's a pretty expensive portable record player. Here's the first record player that I had, this little Fidelity model, and this one, just to give you an idea of a basic record player for the time, and that only cost £21.99, which makes the Soundburger look expensive, but it doesn't actually look expensive, if you know what I mean. The brightly coloured plastic made it look at the time like a child's toy. That's what I thought it was when I first saw it, but it isn't. It's a pretty decent record player. It's got a proper cartridge on it, but I can imagine most people would have dismissed it as just being something for kids. Fast forward to 2010 and hey look, it's Crosley to the rescue. With their Crosley revolution, they're resurrecting the Soundburger design with their new record player. I've got one here. It's not exactly the one shown in that picture. I think they did a couple of different models of this, but let's have a look at it. Unfortunately, but perhaps not surprisingly, this has turned out to be a pale imitation of the original. It's almost as though someone with a very vague memory of the Soundburger from their childhood had rung up a factory to try and get it manufactured again and tried to describe it to them over the phone, but unfortunately the two people spoke different languages and the phone line was very crackly. But the factory decided to press on anyway, despite the fact the first chap had got the wrong number and actually rung up a factory that had only ever made shoes before. When compared against the Soundburger, it feels very insubstantial, lightweight, hollow even. That's without the batteries in there. Talking of the batteries, they go in the compartment on the bottom here. It takes 4 AA's, but there was something a little bit wrong with that battery compartment because the batteries didn't want to go in there. You have to kind of lever them in, and it's not something you could do with your fingers. I had to use a screwdriver to get the batteries seated properly. That's not a good sign when you can't even make a battery compartment. As well as batteries, you can power this by USB. There's a switch up there to select which one of those you're using, and then behind this compartment at the front, that's where the earphones reside. Now when you got the original Soundburger, it came with folding headphones, but of course these are more convenient to carry around. I notice there's a sticker on there. It looks like it's been printed with a label printed to say the earphones are in there. Now, there are a couple of warning signs where I feel that I might have ended up buying a fake Crosley. Notice here it says replace meh needle. I can't imagine they'd have let it go out with that spelling mistake on there. And that and the label printed sticker for the earphones just makes me think this might be some kind of knockoff. I can't say for definite, the box and everything look quite legitimate, but yeah, it could be a fake, so I'm not saying for definite this is a Crosley. But carrying on looking at whatever this is, we've got a volume control for the headphones there, the power and the speed 33 and 45, the switch to operate the lid mechanism, and on the back here we've got a USB output. It was supplied with software to digitize your vinyl into a computer, a line output and a headphone socket there as well. Now remember what I said earlier on about the Soundburger having the armrest which doubles as a stabilizer. It's made out of rubber so it grips nicely to that centre spindle and pushes down onto the record. Well, one of those is provided with the reproduction of the Soundburger, except on this one it doesn't serve all three functions. It does operate as an armrest and as a 45 RPM adapter, but it doesn't operate as a stabilizer because it's made out of hard plastic, so it doesn't push down on the record at all. There's a lot of clearance above it when you've got the lid closed, so there's no stabilization going on. But I can see why they've done that, because it's a very unusual turntable this. You have to have that loose because it needs to spin around the center spindle, because the center spindle itself doesn't move. The turntable does, but the spindle stays perfectly still. I'll just put a bit of tape on it here just to show you that that's not moving around, which is very unusual because every other turntable I've got, as far as I know, the centre spindle rotates with the turntable. Now, while I've got my strobe disc here, I thought we'll just give it a go. We'll see how accurate the speed is on this one. And you can see, looking at the outside ring on there, it is moving a little bit quickly. It's not drastically out of whack, though. It's just a little bit too fast. We'll move to the 45 RPM, which is the next ring in, and you can see that one's moving a little bit fast as well. Now, if you follow V Westlife's channel here on YouTube, you'll know he's done some videos about Crosley turntables, and he recommends replacing the sapphire stylus with a diamond one to get a better performance. And I would have done that if there was one in the box. There isn't, however, and I decided not to buy one because I wasn't happy with the tracking forces that this turntable was exhibiting on my records. These scales go up to 5.1 grams, and they're maxing out at that. So if I put a 5 gram weight on here and then tally it, it takes it down to approximately minus 5 grams. So if we start at that point and then put the arm back on the scales, anything above 0 will be above 5 grams. So with everything added together, it takes the tracking force up to a not inconsiderable 5.6 grams or thereabouts, which is approximately 3 times the amount of my original Soundburger. And it turns out that that isn't the worst of its problems. Just have a listen to this. And while we're looking at basics that they've got wrong, I don't understand why you'd have the handle on the end of the tone arm at such a narrow angle. It makes it very difficult to pick it up, especially once the tone arm moves towards the centre of the disc. If you lift it up from there, more often than not, you'll end up scraping the record with your knuckle. And I shouldn't have to do multiple takes of me dropping the stylus in order to get a clean one where it doesn't jump across the run-in. In the end, I resorted to using a screwdriver to get the arm in the right position to record the audio clips I wanted for this video. Now, I would have thought if this was an older turntable, it needs the belts replacing, it needs the capacitors replacing, given the amount of hum and hiss and crackles and things, but it does say it was only made in August 2014, so none of those things should apply. It's just a really awful turntable. Now, I do have one more Soundburger type record player to show you quickly. This is one that I bought because I thought it might be something interesting, a bit novel to show you. Unfortunately, though, it got damaged in transit, so the plastic got snapped in quite a few places. Now, I could glue some of these things together. That part is just supposed to go in the end there. There's another window that's supposed to go in the middle that's fallen out. But the reason I wanted to show you this is because, as well as being a record player, it's also a cassette player, which I thought was a neat idea. However, upon closer inspection, it turns out this is a very low-end product, from the stylus through to the cassette deck. Once I put my 3 C cells in here, we can see the cassette mechanism is now operating, and there's only one of those spindles can spin. The left-hand one is a solid plastic peg. This was quite common in cheap low-end cassette decks, personal stereos of the time. Also, I can't stop it from spinning. The stop button isn't working, and unfortunately the position for the tape is supposed to be the off position. If I move it into the turntable position, the light comes on for that, so you'll just run through your batteries leaving them in this. There's no way to stop it. I'll have to take it apart sometime, I suppose. But you can also see when I put the stylus on here, the record player stops, so it needs new belts as well. So it's pretty much knackered in every sense of the word, and I don't actually think it's worth trying to get this one back together again. But just wanted to show you that because it's a bit of an unusual oddity from the past. In stark contrast to its rather gimmicky name and toy-like appearance, the Audio-Technica Sound Burger is a surprisingly capable record player. The same, of course, goes for its rebranded versions, the Mr. Disc, the Dual PRP5, and there are a couple more besides in the early 80s. You definitely don't want to get a modern reproduction. Whilst they might bear a passing resemblance to a Soundburger, they really are just pale imitations. But with that said, the Soundburger really doesn't warrant some of those crazier prices you see them going for on eBay. I mean, it's okay, but it's not all that. After all, those are really just collectors outbidding each other for them. But your average person who just wants a portable record player, unfortunately they're being priced out of the market. I'd suggest if you are that average person and you do want to get hold of one of these, just put in a save search and just wait until you see one come up at the right price, perhaps one that needs its belts replacing. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.